Senator Stump, Autocycles. Welcome, Senator Stump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to say that this is the most exciting one of the bills that you're going to take up.
Well, we've got some great photos of some cool things down here, so that's pretty exciting.
Yes, it is. It is exciting, and what we're hoping to do with this legislation is to help the new Autocycle, the definition of the new Autocycle, which is produced by Polaris Industries, which is in my district up in Roseau, to help them with kind of correct the way this Autocycle is looked upon. And a number of other states have already done this. It's called a slingshot, as you can see. And this is a three-wheel vehicle, and it's currently kind of stuck in a definition of a motorcycle but yet it drives exactly like a car. Has a steering wheel and all of the things that a car has. So what number of states have done is to follow the recommendations that are produced, kind of the best practices of these national or the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, and put this vehicle in a different category than a motorcycle as far as the licensure that you need to drive it. And if this legislation passes, what would happen is that if you have a Class D driver's license, you would be able to drive this Autocycle just like a car, and you wouldn't necessarily have to have a motorcycle license. So we have Linda Linsby here, who represents Polaris Industry, and we also have a short presentation that we'd like to show you a little bit more what this Autocycle looks like and how it handles and so on. So maybe I can turn it over to Linda.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Dibble and members of the committee. My name is Linda Lisenby, and I'm here today on behalf of Polaris Industries, which is a Medina, Minnesota-based power sports manufacturer that has a large manufacturing facility up in Senator Stump's district. In November of 2014, the Polaris launched the Slingshot, a product described in your materials that is designed and certified to comply with federal motor vehicle safety standards for a motorcycle. This motorcycle is distributed by Polaris in 14 independently owned small business dealer partners touching all parts of Minnesota. Since Slingshot went to market, it has been titled and registered as a motorcycle in Minnesota, and operators are required to hold a motorcycle endorsement to operate it. While it's legal in Minnesota, Senate File 2776 appropriately creates a subtype of motorcycle called Autocycle that Slingshot and other similarly configured products would fall under. Nearly 24 states listed in your handouts utilize this approach as it accomplishes three primary goals. First, it adds appropriate levels of prescriptiveness for these motorcycles while retaining consistency between state and federal treatment, yet is flexible enough to not be exclusionary to other manufacturers. This is important as these products, despite being unique from handlebar steered and straddle seated motorcycles, come with a 17-character VIN, compliance labeling, and manufacturer's statement of origin that all tie back to its federal classification as a motorcycle. Secondly, Senate File 2776 resolves some practical considerations that exist under current definition. Customers increasingly walk into dealers that carry Slingshot without a motorcycle endorsement or a permit that is required to even test drive a Slingshot. This barrier to entry does not make practical sense when you see the three-wheeled configuration and unique operational features, the steering wheel, pedals at the floor, bucket seats of this product, and it disadvantages dealers who have made significant investments in order to grow their business with safe, innovative products. Additionally, there is the practical consideration of how to accommodate skills testing for these vehicles given the physical space limitations of motorcycle testing sites, not to mention that the skills tests are not necessary in order to operate an autocycle. This is why all states with an autocycle definition accompany it with an exemption to the motorcycle endorsement similar to what is proposed here. Finally, the definition under Section 1 requires that in order to be registered, an autocycle must meet recognized federal motor safety standards, which Slingshot far exceeds with its crash avoidance features like traction and stability control, drag torque mitigation system, steel reinforced frame with crumple zones, steel reinforced roll hoops, and three-point safety harness. Senate File 2776 achieves these goals while providing the Department of Public Safety desire clarity for these types of motorcycles in order to implement administrative processes around incident reporting and otherwise to distinguish traditional motorcycle types from autocycles. This is something Polaris has collaborated with ABATE of Minnesota to achieve and is supported by the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators Best Practices. AMVA's report is also in your handouts. It is for these reasons that Polaris requests favorable consideration of Senate File 2776. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Is it Lisenby or Lusenby?
Lisenby.
Lisenby. Thank you, Ms. Lisenby. Questions, members? Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the difference between this and an automobile? I'm looking at this packet of information, and it looks very much like just a mini car, not a motorcycle. And so how is this different then, and why should it be a motorcycle? Man, I heard what you said, but I need to hear specifically.
Ms. Lisenby.
Chairman Dibble and Senator Kiffmeyer, the federal government has classified this vehicle as a motorcycle. It is a very broad definition to be classified as a motorcycle. It is a vehicle with 3 or fewer wheels in contact with the ground.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yes. And so what kind of insurance, what covers here then? Is it then going to be a motorcycle insurance, which does not include a passenger? Or, I mean, what about the insurance issues? Because this is getting way beyond and includes a lot more people than usually a single rider on a motorcycle, maybe 2. How does insurance work with this?
Ms. Lisenby.
Senator Dibble, Senator Kiffmeyer, it currently would require motorcycle insurance. It is classified as a motorcycle, and so it would require motorcycle insurance.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yes, well, that doesn't really explain to me the concern I'm bringing up about the passenger. So then tell me, what is motorcycle insurance and what is car insurance? How do those two affect both the rider and the passenger in the case of injury? We had the largest number of deaths with motorcycles last year. I mean, this is serious that we're doing here and looking out for whatever its classification is, but the people riding them and that safety concern. So what's the difference between motorcycle insurance and car insurance, both for the driver and the passenger?
Ms. Lisenby.
Chairman Dibble and Senator Kiffmeyer, I am not an insurance expert. However, I know that there are significantly different insurance requirements for an automobile, and there are other requirements for motorcycle insurance. Motorcycle insurance has lesser requirements. That's currently how state law is.
Well, leaves me with a lot of lacking information, but maybe, Mr. Chair, somebody else can testify to this and give more information. I don't want to have our witness, if she doesn't feel she's able to give the information, then I would rather wait until somebody can.
So we'll call for open testimony at the conclusion
Okay.
of the witness list and other testifiers. Any other questions, members?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Stump. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Senator Carlson and Senator Newman. Oh, sorry. Okay. We'll go with Senator Carlson, then Senator Newman.
Thank you,
We'll
Mr.
go
Chair.
back. I'm sorry, excuse me. Senator Stump, did you have something to this point, to the
Well, I was
previous
just
line of
going
questioning?
to, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to mention that we do have an amendment that I'd like to have someone offer.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Let's do that now.
I know about this amendment, so I'll offer the amendment, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. So we have Senator Tomassoni offering the A160909 amendment. It's coming around. It's an author's amendment. And looks like it has to do with seat belts. What does this do? Oh. So people would need to use seatbelts if there are seatbelts in the vehicle. All right, any questions on the amendment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, so we'll go with Senator Carlson and then Senator Newman. Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm wondering, when you get a motorcycle endorsement, there's a lot of differences between an automobile and a motorcycle. Of course, you have to balance it, but otherwise there's hand controls, there's, brakes are different, clutches are different. And I'm wondering, how is driving this the same or different than a motorcycle? Because I think the purpose of getting a motorcycle endorsement is to learn how to drive a different type of vehicle. And when I got my motorcycle endorsement, you largely just had to be able to walk by it. But today, you have to have a test on the style, the type and size of your motorcycle, and it's pretty complex. And I think it's real important that it is complex also. And I'm wondering, for instance, does this vehicle have some of the requirements of automobiles like parking brake? Will it have an automatic transmission? Will it have hand throttle, foot throttle? Will it have both? All of those kinds of differences. And I'm a little concerned when we just take the easy way out and don't allow or don't require any kind of training on this particular vehicle, which I would expect is quite different than either an automobile or the classic motorcycle.
Ms. Lisenby.
Chairman Dibble and Senator Carlson. The vehicle is a standard transmission. It is steered by a steering wheel and foot pedals. So your braking, clutch, and gas are all at your feet. And so it is a standard hand control for a manual transmission. It does have a parking brake. I've been through motorcycle endorsement, and this vehicle, you do not need to balance it. You are sitting in it instead of on it. The configuration is very different. With a motorcycle, the motor is under you versus this vehicle, the motor is out in front of you. Did I answer all of your questions?
Senator Carlson.
Mr. Chair, I guess what I'm wondering is, and I don't really want to go through all the technical details, but, the differences between a motorcycle and this vehicle and a car and this vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Lisenby.
Chairman.
I think we already had some of that in the presentation, but if
Sure.
could fly over the top again real quick.
Okay, Chairman Dibble and Senator Carlson. So this vehicle is similar to a car in that you sit in it, you have a steering wheel, your foot pedal controls. You have a 3-point harness for your seatbelt. Polaris, as the manufacturer, warns for seatbelt use and helmet use in this vehicle. because you are out in the elements like you would be on a motorcycle. So you don't need to balance, however, there can be bugs and other debris from the road that you would need to wear eye protection if you chose not to wear a helmet.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Newman is this to this point? Senator Thompson? We had Senator Newman on the list. Huh?
Sort of.
How sort of?
Sort of a general comment about,
All right, go ahead.
well, Senator Carlson, I don't have a motorcycle endorsement or license, and I don't even want to learn how to ride one, but I would love to drive this thing because I think it's more like a car with, like a convertible with, and I think this would be really a lot of fun, and I'd love to try it, and I definitely would not go get my motorcycle license to drive this thing, so if I could have drive it with my, with my regular driver's license, I think that would be the way to go, and this thing just looks like a lot of fun.
Senator Newman.
Mr. Chair, I've got questions on the licensing, the license plate requirements and insurance requirements. I'm not sure if there's anybody in the room from, say, DMV that would be coming forward to testify, or if there are any other testifiers. But those are the two areas that I'd like to inquire of. I'm not sure it'd be fair to ask these questions of Senator Stumpf or his witness. So my question is there anybody here from DMV that would come forward and talk to us about this vehicle?
Is there anyone from Department of Motor Vehicles or Department of Public Safety who is able to respond to Senator Newman's questions? Ms. Weeks. Oh, here we are. Come forward. Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tom Henderson. I'm the Program Director for Vehicle Services with Driver and Vehicle Service in Department of Public Safety.
Great, thank you. Senator Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Henson?
Henderson, sir.
Henderson, thank you. First question on licensing requirements, and what has been described to us so far, I think, is that this is a vehicle that is similar to a car, and in the handout, they are indicating that a regular passenger car license would be required to operate the Autocycle, presumably on a public road. Can you comment on the licensing requirements for this vehicle should this bill pass?
Mr. Henderson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this vehicle is to be licensed, or you're supposed to have a Class D license to operate this vehicle, much like a passenger vehicle. You do not need the motorcycle endorsement for this vehicle. In this case, it's kind of a hybrid between the two of them.
And Mr. Chair,
Senator Newman.
Mr. Henderson, then to the license plate that goes on the vehicle, what type of a plate would be required for this Autocycle?
Mr. Henderson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this would receive a motorcycle plate.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Senator Newman.
And that confuses me just a little bit. It's going to get a light motorcycle plate, but no motorcycle endorsement is required to operate it, correct?
Mr. Henderson.
Mr. Chairman, members, yes, that is correct.
Okay. And one final question then.
Senator Newman.
Mr. Henderson, are you able to comment on the insurance requirements of this vehicle? Automobiles require no-fault coverage. There's available UM/UIM coverage. Those requirements aren't present for motorcycles. This isn't a motorcycle, and it's similar to a car. So what is going to be required by the state of Minnesota for purposes of mandatory insurance on this Autocycle?
Mr. Henderson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Department of Commerce sets the standards for insurance, not the Driver and Vehicle Services Division, so I can't comment on that. When these vehicles are registered, they do have to provide insurance for a motorcycle when they are registered.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Newman.
Senator, excuse me, Senator Stumpf, I don't expect you to maybe have the answer at your fingertips, but maybe you could check with the Department of Commerce and find out what is going to be required for purposes of insurance, because there is a difference in terms of what is mandated for a motorcycle, what is mandated for an automobile, and I'm not sure, this almost sounds like a hybrid between a motorcycle and an automobile, and so I simply don't know what would be required for insurance purposes.
Sir
Thank you,
Newman,
Mr. Chair.
council may have maybe not the full response, but some insight.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Mr. Chair.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, I get people drifting in and out, and so if it's possible for you just to remind people, and I'm reminding them by talking about it, get into your microphone so everything can be heard, because otherwise it gets soft at times and it gets hard to
All right.
follow, and I
It's a good
can
word
only
for me,
imagine
too.
the
I have
people
a
in the
soft
crowd
voice,
can
so.
hear less than we can.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Berezovsky, with feeling.
Mr. Chair, in Chapter 65B, which is the automobile insurance chapter, there is a provision in Section 65B.48, reparation security compulsory, that deals strictly with motorcycle coverage. And it says every owner of a motorcycle registered or required to be registered in this state, et cetera, operate in this state, et cetera, shall provide and maintain security, excuse me, for the payment of tort liabilities arising out of the maintenance or use of the motorcycle in this state. Now, there may be other sections in 65B, I'm just kind of leafing through, I'm not real familiar with this, but it is classified as a motorcycle, it is licensed as a motorcycle, so it would have the same insurance obligation as a motorcycle. You're welcome.
And Senator Jensen, I think, had some insight to this end as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the question on the insurance, both motorcycle and auto have liability insurance available, which would cover passenger as well. They both have options for comp and collision. The difference between auto and motorcycle would be in auto, we have no fault insurance that's required, and motorcycle coverage is medical, is called MedPay, which goes on your medical insurance. That's some of the difference between the two, but you are required to have liability, and then there's options for comp and collision and option for medical payments.
Thank you, Senator Jensen. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I thought that is still my question. I appreciate what Senator Jensen said, but I really want to hear from the Department of Commerce. I want to hear from somebody who really knows this insurance and can say in a very strong way, rather than us as members assuming that kind of liability of doing that. I just am not satisfied, and I don't know if there is somebody here or we can get somebody so that we can have a very simple answer to a very simple question about where we are. And I don't know if they're here, if they can get here or whatever, but it is something I really think we should be able to have an answer to. Do we have somebody? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Thomasoni.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Kiffmeyer, there's motorcycle insurance and there's car insurance, and if this is classified as a motorcycle, it gets motorcycle insurance. I mean, it's pretty simple.
There's a difference between the two, and I just want to know what the difference is. I understand there's one of each. I'm just asking real simple, what is the difference? Who's covered? I'm concerned about passengers.
I thought Senator Jensen had answered that question, but maybe you can speak off to the side and ask Senator Jensen for a little more detailed information. Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Joel Carlson, I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Association for Justice. I think we did contact staff and we wanted to provide some comments to the committee about the bill. And just, our members represent policyholders and others who are injured in motor vehicle and motorcycle accidents. And we do have a concern that we would like the committee to consider as we now create a new classification of vehicles that are allowed on the road as it relates to their insurance. And having said that, I've told Senator Stump and others, we don't oppose the bill that they're moving forward. So I don't want our comments to be viewed as something that we oppose the bill, but we do want you to know about the insurance requirements that are out there and how insurance operates for both the operator and passengers of motorcycles. You need to know that motorcycles are excluded from providing no-fault coverage, underinsured motorist coverage, and uninsured motorist coverage. The only requirement that they have is to carry security for third-party liability that generally doesn't attach to the passenger, only to others who would be injured. And that limit of liability by statute is the same as what is required for an automobile, which is $30,000 per individual, $60,000 per accident, and $10,000 for property damage. But if you are a passenger, as an example, in an automobile that maybe doesn't have insurance, or you are hit by an uninsured driver, just as a passenger, you have the ability, and the law allows you to access your own insurance coverage. That is not the case as it relates to now passengers in this vehicle. The law specifically excludes from coverage accidents that arise out of the use or operation of a motorcycle. The flip side of that, I guess is an easier way to say it, it only covers you if it operates out of the operation of a motor vehicle, of which this bill defines now these half motorcycle, half cars as being a motorcycle and not an automobile. And so we have seen many, many accidents, injuries, and deaths resulting from people who are riding on motorcycles that are very underinsured. And that is a significant problem. We had the highest number of motorcycle deaths in the history of the state in 2015. We had 47 deaths on motorcycles in 2014. And those accidents and injuries are not insignificant. The car versus motorcycle situation is not a scratch or a bump. These are major, major injuries that have no insurance requirements and no insurance requirements or protection for the passengers. And that is what our concern is. And so as the bill moves forward, whether it's Commerce, Judiciary, wherever you sort that out, at a minimum, I believe you would want to have a passenger who has available coverage on their own vehicles to be covered now in this new vehicle, at a minimum. Whether you add additional insurance requirements for this and just treat it as an automobile or a motorcycle is a policy question for you to decide. We, of course, argue in favor of more protection for the motoring public, and that, in addition to protection for the people in the vehicle, it protects all of us. The whole reason we have motor vehicle insurance is to have the motoring public pay for the costs of motor vehicle accidents. We don't want to shift those costs onto employer-paid health care, the state, and our other benefits that we all provide. We want, to the extent possible, to have those accidents paid for by the motoring public, and that is why we have compulsory insurance in Minnesota. So as you discuss this, you need to know that motorcycles and classifying these as a motorcycle does have a significant implication on the insurance, not just for the driver, but the passenger. And we just ask that you do think of, how do we want to classify this? Is it an automobile, which it looks like a duck and sounds like a duck? Maybe it's a duck. You steer it, you brake with it. You don't need a motorcycle endorsement to drive it. It's maybe more like an automobile than a cycle, but that's a policy question that I really think you should have, because these are significant vehicles that go at a very high speed that we want to have adequate protection for. Mr. Chair, thank you for hearing from us, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Questions, members? Senator Kittmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that gives me a more clear picture, and I think it's really important for us as legislators to look out for the general public, because when we pass these laws and we put them in place, we ought to think about that. I mean, we deal with it all the time here. I think there can be a solution to that. It's not a matter of not having the bill. I think there's a solution to this, and so I don't know if it's going to be in this committee or if it's going to Commerce, where it can be addressed, or if Ms. Veroshovsky has any ideas that we can deal with. I had sent a question to her a little bit ago if there was some way to attribute the insurance question here in this committee and be able to deal with it before it leaves. If she has any language at all.
We are now contemplating a referral to Commerce. That may be a good idea. So stay tuned. Senator Jensen.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And the question I thought we were looking at is the classification of this vehicle. And if we're talking about changes in the insurance, we're really talking about whether or not we want to classify it as an auto or a motorcycle, because those insurance items are already designated in statute and already there. So we would be basically sending it to Commerce to decide if we want to change the bill. So we need to have the conversation here that says, is this the classification that we want for this particular vehicle? And that's what this bill is doing. We're not changing insurance in this bill. We are deciding as a policy matter, should this vehicle be classified as motorcycle or an auto or whatever, something different, and then be subjected to the statutes that are already in place for those specific designations within our statutes. So I think we need to address that here, because when we decide to change the insurance, does it come back here then to decide what classification? I think we need to have that conversation here.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Tomasoni.
did I hear the witness say that this is classified federally as a motorcycle? So doesn't federal law supersede state law?
Senator Tomasoni, I was just asking council about our latitude to define a particular type of vehicle differently from federal classification, and she's looking into that question right now. Ms. Berezovsky, do you have an answer? Can we be different than the feds on something like this?
Oh, I'm not asking for that.
Thank you. At this point, looking at the federal regs, the citation that was incorporated in this 0909 amendment is motor vehicle safety standards. So I have yet to find, and perhaps the witness can help with a citation as to where the feds have classified the auto cycle.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Lisenby.
Chairman Dibble and members of the committee. So the federal government, this specific amendment defines that it's tying this vehicle to the motorcycle statute federally.
This is not.
And this was a reviser's amendment that took place in the House, and the reviser wanted it specifically spelled out, tied to the statute, versus we had it just broadly the federal motorcycle statute.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Tomasoni, just so that we're clear, it's defined as a motorcycle for federal highway safety standards. The state and all 50 states can have the insurance requirements for vehicles operating on their state that they choose. So we're not saying that that the safety standards have to be different. The question is it classified as a motorcycle for insurance or an automobile for insurance? So we're not changing the federal safety standards as these vehicles are classified. The only distinction is what is the appropriate level of classification or insurance that the state may want to impose upon these new vehicles. And I haven't read all 50 states and their insurance requirements for automobiles, but they vary greatly, I can tell you that.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tomasoni.
Explain to me then what I understood to be that the federal government classifies this vehicle as a motorcycle. Clarify that for me then.
Mr. Carlson.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members, as I understand that CFR, it defines this as a motorcycle as it relates to federal highway safety standards, crash standards, and the like. It doesn't have, it's completely silent, to my knowledge, as it relates to any type of insurance requirements.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Senator
are you
Thomasoni.
suggesting that we can say this is classified as a motorcycle, but the state of Minnesota may allow it to have other forms of insurance that a motorcycle doesn't have, such as I don't know, no-fault insurance or
Sure.
or passenger insurance?
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman and members, that's exactly, I think, the issue we're trying to bring to the
So-
committee. And I can tell you that through an amendment 265B with the definition of a motor vehicle, if you include an autocycle in the definition of a motor vehicle, the insurance would attach. But right now, as you are attempting in, I believe it's section 2, it's on page 1 of the bill, you are defining it as an autocycle. You are defining it in this bill now as a motorcycle. That's how you pick up the insurance distinction. That's how I'm tracking it. I'm be happy to be counseled by staff if I'm misreading it, but it looks to me like on page 1 in section 2, under the definition of a motorcycle, you're now adding this new definition of autocycle.
And
Senator
Mr.
Thompson.
Chairman, but the autocycle is classified in this bill as well as federally as a motorcycle. So the insurance that would be required for this would be motorcycle insurance. You're saying that if we want to change that, we can. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mr. Chairman and members, I guess
Mr. Carlson.
section 1 of the bill defines autocycle. And the follow-up question to that for me is, where does that fit in 65B, I believe is .44, where the definitions of motor vehicle are? That's the question. So you're defining what it is, and that it has to meet federal motor vehicle safety standards for motorcycles. The question is, where does that fit into 65B as it relates to the insurance requirements for these new vehicles, which you can make any policy decision you want to make about that. We would suggest that you provide some greater protection, at least to the point of allowing me to use my own insurance that I can use if I'm injured in a car as a passenger.
Ms. Lisenby.
Chairman Dibble and members of the committee, the federal government, for a vehicle that has less than 4 wheels, is a motorcycle. And so this vehicle federally is a motorcycle. We're tying it to the motorcycle safety standards. And I think that this conversation is a broader conversation about insurance coverage for motorcycles in Minnesota. It's not just this vehicle, which we're capturing as a subcategory of motorcycle, but it's a broader conversation.
Well, Ms. Lisenby, I don't think so necessarily, because this is clearly designed to carry passengers, and I think the question before us is how well are passengers covered under motorcycle insurance? So it's similar, but it's not the same. It's not, I don't think it necessarily begs a larger question about motorcycle insurance. And actually, I don't think this is the committee to sort all of this out, quite frankly. I think Commerce Committee is the committee to sort this out.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
We're finding out if Commerce has the capacity or time to take this matter up. Senator
Mr. Chair.
Thomasoni.
Maybe we should go to Senator Jensen for a second here.
All right. So,
Mr. Chair?
all right, we're all popping up here. So I'll let Senator Jensen speak to this matter, but we have Senator Kiffmeyer, Senator Newman, and Senator Jensen. Well, Senator Jensen is going now, I guess, on the list.
And Mr. Chair, motorcycles carry passengers as well, and there are liability coverages, and the uninsured and underinsured is an option. It's not restricted from them being able to purchase it. So what we're hearing about now is a change or something to the motorcycle insurance statutes, which is not part, I don't think, Senator Stump, that you're bringing forward a change to the insurance. It's something to think about, I guess. But on this particular bill, if it's classified at the federal level as a motorcycle, there would be some issues to changing it then from at this point from the insurance aspect, because that's not what this bill is doing.
Okay, so we have Senator Kiffmeyer, Senator Newman, and then Senator Westrom. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, what I see in this bill is a reference to the federal statute that this piece of equipment is built to those standards. It isn't that the federal says this is or is not a motorcycle. We are saying in Minnesota law that we're going to reference those standards for the construction of that vehicle. However, there is a very magical word that we sometimes use here in the legislature called notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, because I think it is in our purview here because the designation is connected to the insurance. As soon as you designate it this way, you've also affected the statute in regards to insurance. But this vehicle, when I look at it and look at its construction, and it's called an Autocycle, is in a situation I think we ought to take a look, or another committee should take a look. I have no objection. I would agree with Senator Tomassoni. If I'm going to get out there on anything, this would be more in keeping, but I also want to be sure that sometime in the future that we don't address this issue, we have problems. They're going to come back to us in the legislature and say, why didn't you think of this? Why didn't you consider this? And they rightly so. We should. But I think there may be something that may enable us to get through this by, because we can do that notwithstanding, sometimes that can help us to, for the purpose of insurance, that we can maybe include that. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not general counsel, but I just have that concern and one possible solution.
Senator Jensen, to
Mr.
this
Chair,
point.
are these on the road right now? How are they currently insured?
Ms. Lisenby.
So, Chairman, the Slingshot are on Minnesota roads. They are currently classified as a motorcycle, and we've worked with the Department of Public Safety to determine how the vehicles would be handled. They've said as a motorcycle, and we've worked with them about how to handle incident reporting through rules in the future. And also, I did just pull up the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, defines a motorcycle as a motor vehicle with motive power having a seat or saddle for use of the rider and designed to travel on not more than 3 wheels in contact with the ground.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Jensen.
So I would suggest that we are, in this conversation, changing current statute even with this particular vehicle, which is not what this bill. We're trying to match the safety standards, not deal with what's happening with the insurance side, which already is currently taking place. These vehicles are on the road. The insurance is in place but based on what the Commerce Department has decided already. So maybe something for another bill that would look at all motorcycle safety and motorcycle regulations, but not in this particular bill where we're trying to make sure that the safety standards are in place when they manufacture them as to code, which we've said the federal has designated as motorcycle.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Thomas.
Chairman, I would concur with that. I think what we're looking at here is a motorcycle, and trying to figure out whether or not they can use a driver's license for it, not whether or not they should have motorcycle or car insurance for it. And I think Senator Jensen is correct that this should pass out here as is. And then if somebody wants to look at motorcycle insurance and say you need better coverage, then we should go that direction with a different bill. And I think because it's a whole different discussion.
Senator Newman.
Just so that we have a lack of consensus within the committee, I disagree with Senator Jensen. I disagree with Senator Tomassoni. I think it is perfectly within the jurisdiction of this committee to decide whether or not this is a motorcycle or an automobile for purposes of insurance. This is not an insurance bill. This is a bill that is classifying a new type of a vehicle which has been described to us as similar to a car. If this committee decides And I think it has the right to do so because I don't think Minnesota is preempted by federal law to address whether this is a automobile or a motorcycle for purposes of insurance. I think this committee could decide whether it is a motorcycle or an automobile for insurance purposes, and the insurance is already in play. And we don't even have to have that discussion. But I do think that it is perfectly within this committee's jurisdiction to make that decision as to how are we going to classify this thing. And I think it has some pretty important ramifications because it is, in fact, a new type of a vehicle. So, you know, if the bill goes out of here and passes out of this committee, classified as a motorcycle, those insurance questions are answered. If, on the other hand, this committee decides, no, we're going to classify this as a motor vehicle for purposes of insurance, then that insurance is already in play and decided. And it's totally, I think it's totally up to this committee as to which way you want to go.
Thank you. Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Carlson, you mentioned at a minimum, maybe look at least having passengers having the ability to access their own insurance if they were injured. Do we have any other examples where that's done? It's kind of a hybrid. It wouldn't be the full UIM or no fault package, but it would, well, maybe it would actually, now that I think about it. Do we have any examples where
Sure.
there's a crossover as that is allowed for the passengers of this or motorcycles?
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Westrom and members, that absolutely is the case. And there are numerous examples of passengers, pedestrians, others who carry auto coverage who are injured as a result of the operation of a motor vehicle that are able to access their own coverage. My concern that I have with this new Autocycle is that by being defined as a motorcycle, you're precluding them from accessing even their own coverage when it may be applicable. Because being injured on a motorcycle, by definition in statute, is not a compensable injury arising out of the use of a motor vehicle, period.
So, Mr. Carlson, Mr. Chairman, we really don't have a hybrid or another scenario where we've crossed over kind of the two. It's either defining it as a motorcycle, and then it's got that issue, defining it as a motor vehicle, and then you've got the coverage that would kick in.
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Westrom, there is a case that I'm from 1999 that I'm not overly familiar with, but if you were a passenger on a motor vehicle, or excuse me, a passenger on a motorcycle of which you were not an owner, you may be able to access your uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. And that is only to the extent you're a passenger but not an owner. So husband and wife, that wouldn't apply. You may be able to cross over into your own coverage, but you're not required to have it. If you had it, you may be able to. That hybrid that you're talking about does exist in at least one instance that I'm aware of. It was an old case, 1999.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Thomasoni.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Carlson, but you're talking about motorcycle insurance, which is what applies to this particular vehicle. And so therefore, what you need to be doing is trying to get the motorcycle insurance statutes changed and have better insurance on motorcycles. This particular vehicle is classified as a motorcycle, and so it would be insured by motorcycle insurance, but it's irrelevant as to whether or not the insurance passes over to the passenger. It's a matter of whether or not you have motorcycle insurance or car insurance. Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me it would be really simple here to say an owner of one of these vehicles may opt for car insurance. And get out of here.
And Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Tomassoni, we're absolutely talking about your own car insurance. Okay, we're not just talking about motorcycle insurance right now, which is just the limited liability we're talking about. And the case that I'm referencing, I'll just briefly, tell you that an injured motorcycle passenger may use their own car's uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage only if the passenger is not an owner of the motorcycle. And so if I'm a passenger, I may be able to access that, but that is only under certain circumstances. What I'm saying is if I'm a passenger in a car that is uninsured and I have car insurance, I can use it. If I'm a passenger in one of these vehicles, the question is, should I be able to access my own coverage?
Well, Mr. Chairman, if you're not the owner, you can. But if you're the owner, you can't because it's a motorcycle. I mean, this is about the difference between motorcycle insurance and car insurance. And so I think it's pretty clear. The question becomes, do we want to make this eligible for car insurance? And maybe that's what we do, and we just say the owner of the vehicle may apply for car insurance on this particular vehicle. And I think we've solved the problem here.
And Mr. Chairman and members, I assume the bill is needed for.
Mr. Carlson.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I assume the bill is needed for a reason, right? If it's all covered now and everything's handled, there's no need for the bill.
Mr. Chairman, the reason for the bill is so that you can use your regular driver's license to drive the vehicle and not have to apply for a motorcycle license. That's the reason for the bill.
Right.
Mr. Carlson.
And you have to wear a seatbelt, too.
That's the turning point here. It's your car driver's license.
We will slow this conversation down and speak through the chair. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's for everyone.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly the point, Senator Tomassoni. You want to be able to use your automobile driver's license. You don't need any special motorcycle license to even operate this thing. To me, it's looking more like a car than it is a cycle. And I'm not trying to do damage to what he's trying to pass here. I'm asking the question on Section 2 of the bill, and even if that wasn't included, it at least leaves the question open because Section 2 of the bill specifically defines Autocycle now as a motorcycle. And that's what gives us heartburn.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tomassoni.
We wouldn't need the bill if, in fact, we weren't allowing people to use their driver's license, their car driver's license to drive this vehicle, because they would have to get a motorcycle license and they can drive the vehicle without this bill. But the issue becomes that this is as much like a car as it is like a motorcycle, and since it's got a steering wheel and it's got a gas pedal and it's got a brake and it's got two wheels in the front and you drive it like this, just like a car, that you should be able to drive it with your driver's license. That's the issue. If it's classified as a motorcycle, then it's insured by motorcycle insurance. But if we want people to insure it with their car insurance and add it to their auto policy, maybe we just put it's eligible for car insurance in the bill.
Senator Tomassoni, it sounds like an amendment that you'd like to offer.
Ms. Beresowski.
File 2752 will probably take some extensive conversation, so I'm dubious about our ability to get to that. But we will give this idea a try here on Senate File 2776. Ms. Beresowski.
Mr. Chair, this is a bit long. It's inserted after 1.6, so at the beginning of the bill, a new Section 1, amending Minnesota Statute 65B.48 by adding a new Subdivision 9. Subdivision 9, I guess the head note would be Autocycle. An autocycle within the meaning of Minnesota Statute Section 169.011, Subdivision 3A, registered or required to be registered in this state or operated in this state by the owner or with the owner's permission, shall provide and maintain a plan of reparation security either, 1, under Section 65B.48, subdivisions 1 to 3, complying with all obligations under Then it lists the range of statutes that would apply to your passenger vehicle. For example, Section 65B.41 to Section 65B.71, or 2, under Subdivision 5, complying with requirements for motorcycle coverage. Renumber the sections.
And so in summary layman's terms, what does that amendment accomplish, Ms. Berezovsky?
This amendment is in the insurance, the automobile or motor vehicle insurance chapter, and it ties in the definition of autocycle from the traffic regulations section that's in this bill. And it says an autocycle has to have insurance if it's operated and owned in this state, either basically as a passenger vehicle or as a motorcycle, complying with the limits stated in statute.
So this accomplishes Senator Tomassoni's goal of allowing the owner of a autocycle to opt for either automobile insurance or motorcycle insurance.
Mr. Chair, that's what it
All right.
does.
Okay, then
Senator Tomassoni?
Then I'll move that.
All right.
that-
Senator Stump, what do you think of that?
Mr. Chairman and members, I think that would give them the option to do that, provide that insurance that if they want it, so.
Okay, thank you. Questions, members, or reactions? Senator Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Senate Council if you could just go through the explanation one more time. It sounds like there is an option. You could either insure the autocycle and obtain the, I don't know if it's no-fault PIP, UIM, or in the alternative, just the motorcycle insurance. So just walk it through one more time if you wouldn't mind, please.
Ms. Berezovsky.
Mr. Chair, the amendment amends 65B.48, which is the automobile insurance chapter. It adds a subdivision to the basic requirement of automobile insurance or motor vehicle insurance. It adds a subdivision for autocycles. It ties to the definition in Chapter 169 that's established in this bill. And it says that an autocycle so defined that's registered or operated in this state, that the owner of that vehicle has the option to insure it either as a, well, and I can't answer your specific question. I just picked up the statutory range that's cited in that section as the sort of the full range of motor vehicle, passenger vehicle requirements. Either that or motorcycle coverage as outlined in the same statute.
So, Mr. Chair, this would be purely optional on the part of the individual. They go either way that they want, correct?
Mr. Chair, and Senator Newman, yes, one or the other would have to be chosen. So there is no option not to insure, but the owner would be able to choose A or B.
Now I understand. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess maybe Mr. Carlson could weigh in. My sense is, and I like Senator Stump. I like your bill. I want to see it pass. And so the niche of this could be is some passengers would get in this vehicle, and if the owner of it had opted for motorcycle insurance, they would not necessarily they would not necessarily have access to their car insurance, especially if they were related or a spouse of the owner. Mr. Carlson can maybe verify this. But if that owner of the autocycle had elected to insure it under car insurance, then everything would be covered as if it was an automobile instead of a motorcycle. Is that right, Ms. Berezovsky? Did I say that right? And Mr. Carlson could maybe comment.
Counsel.
Mr. Chair and Senator Westrom, yes, I believe you've said that right.
Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Westrom, I agree with staff's interpretation of the language, and as the bill moves to the floor, if there's additional language to clarify that, I want to make sure that on the optional coverage, I can use my own. That's what I want to make sure of that this accomplishes, which I think nobody cares if I can use my own, but I think this gets us there, or very close to it. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you.
I elevated you.
All right. Further questions or comments on the Tomasoni amendment? No. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Anything further?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the bill as amended.
Okay, Senator Tomasoni moves Senate File 2776 as amended, be recommended to pass and referred to the floor. Would anyone else like to testify on Senate File 2776? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you, Senator Stump. Okay, we'll